Hi everyone. I hope that you can all hear me and see me. If you experience any technical issues during this live stream, please let us know in the chat and we'll try to fix these issues if they appear from our part. So, hello again. My name is Marko. I will be your, so to speak, host today. As you probably already know, the purpose of this format is to give you some deeper insights into topics that you presumably already know from our qualification and training processes or from our documentation. But we wanted to give a different approach to these topics that you presumably already have covered before. Now, my goal today is to show you how we at Photomath would approach reviewing. And I would like you to all stay in topic. So the topic of today's live stream is reviewing. So any tasks that and any questions that would consider reviewing, please only ask those questions. Any other questions that you probably have for any other topic, please send us to our community team via the regular communication paths that you already know. So the best way to reach us is via our email, as you already know. So before we start, I would like to tell you how is this all gonna go. So I'm going to show you how would I, as an employee of Photomath for the last 3 years almost, would review some tasks. During my review, you can ask questions. As you probably have already seen, some of our moderators are also present in the chat, so they will answer your questions. Or I'm going to answer your questions explicitly as I go through this review. And so after each task, I will maybe give you a few minutes to write some concrete questions for the corresponding task and answer probably 2 or 3 these questions, and then we're gonna go further. I apologize in advance if some of your questions we leave unanswered, but we'll try to answer all your questions here now, and the ones that don't get answered will get answered via our regular communication paths. So you may ask those questions via our email, and we'll be gladly to answer all of them. So I hope that I can start now. I think that I've covered all the preliminaries that I wanted to say. And I hope that you will find this type of information that I'm going to provide you today useful, and that you can use it in your everyday work when reviewing, or if you are going to become a reviewer in your future work. So I'm going to start now with the first task. Okay, so I'm going to take this task and start. So the idea that I'm going to show you now is how I would approach this task and all other tasks today. If I'm being too fast or too slow, please let me know. I will try to cover as much as possible so that nothing stays ambiguous and that you don't have any questions concerning my part. So the first thing that you as a reviewer should always do is to read the task and all the additional info very carefully. So as you probably already know, the things that we think of when we think of a task is this upper part on the upper left part of our interface, where you can read the text of the task. Under that, we have the additional info that is probably required to solve this task. And also the additional info is sometimes given in the corresponding example. So I'm going to read this task. As we go through 5 or 10 or 20, how much we're gonna have time for, I will try to be faster because I think that you can read all these tasks by yourself. So this task states that the Parks Commission in the town of Euclid decides to build a triangular park with one side that is 400 feet long. And the corresponding task is marked by D, and the task states that to give a pair of lengths for the other two sides of the park, and to provide an explanation how to find this answer by using the graph from part C. So the graph from part C is obtained in the part C, and so presumably the person who wrote this task does not have to explain how to graph this mentioned graph. Okay, so I'll start from step 1. So in step 1, we have let the lengths of the sides of the triangle are x, y, and c. So you may already notice that this sentence is not completely grammatically correct, but it is clear. And this is only, this word R should be actually B, right? So let the lengths of sides of the triangle be x, y, and c, but it doesn't matter in this situation. It's not such a big error that we would really return it, and it doesn't provide any ambiguous information to a person who would presumably read this solution and wanted to know the solution of the corresponding task via this PM solution. So I would say that step 1 is completely okay. In step 2, it says that it is given that the length of one side is 400 feet, so it can be written that C is equal to 400 feet. This is also okay since this information really is given in the text of the task. Now, in step 3, I have by the triangle inequality theorem, it follows, and then I have a system of 3 inequalities. Now, one thing that you always, as a reviewer, have to be sure that the attached hint really is appropriate to the situation that you're observing. So the triangle inequality theorem is really attached on these 3 words, and it really provides additional information that the person who attached this hint wanted it to provide. So A plus B is greater than C, A plus C is greater than B, B plus C is greater than A. One of the things that you can probably notice here is that in the first step, the person who solved the task stated that the lengths of sides of the triangle are x, y, and c. But in this step, the person stated that A, B, and C are the lengths of the sides of the triangle. So probably this is not this is most certainly an error, but it can also be interpreted differently by the person who reads this task. So I'm going to return this step because it violates the precision rule. And why it violates the precision rule? Because because these labels that correspond to the same elements, so the lengths of sides of the triangle, are labeled differently. Okay, so in my feedback, I'm going to write that exactly what I've just said. So that the sides, the labels of the lengths of sides of the observed triangle are different than the ones introduced in the step 1. And this is an explanation what is incorrect in the corresponding step and in the corresponding PM solution. But what I'm also going to add is a comment on how can I answer, or how can I help the person who solves this task and who will get my feedback to correct it completely. So this, I would say that either change either change the labels stated in step 1 or in step 3. Okay, so the steps 1 and 3 are mismatched. We're gonna see what happens afterwards, so maybe some different labels will be used afterwards. But if I go through this task as a user who is looking at only the PM solution, I would be very much confused in this situation where one step we have X, Y, and Z as labels of lengths of sides of the triangle, and in the other step A, B, and C. So this is incorrect. Okay, and let's go on. Okay, so you can see in this step, the person who solved this task used X, Y, and C. So then probably in the step 3 person actually mismatched. So I'm going to change a little bit of my feedback here, and I'm going to state that, so either change the labels in step 1 or in step 3 and all the corresponding steps of the PM solution. So wherever the same error actually is located, this feedback gives the person who solved the task information of what is incorrect and how to correct it, and to correct everything where the same error appeared. And this is something that you as a reviewer also should always consider, and you can in a way buy time with this type of feedback, where you can write if the same error occurred throughout the PM solution in multiple steps. You can always write it in the first step where you can where you first found that error, and to state the person who solved the task to redo the whole PM solution and to correct the whole error throughout the PM solution. So let's go back to this step 4. So one of the things that I can see in step 4 is that in the input, this second inequality is missing the right side. There is no label on the right side. And I can see that in the block LaTeX, if I look at the editor, there is also nothing in here. So this is not a LaTeX error, which means that this is not something which is not visible just in the previewer, but the corresponding label does not even exist in the editor. So this is again something that we would label as a precision error. So the second inequality in the input is incomplete, since there is nothing written on the right side. And again, this is the description of the error, and I'm going to tell the solver to add the missing label, and I think that in this situation we can see that the missing label is Y. So add Y to the right side of the mentioned inequality. Okay, so this is not a very hard task, which means that the review is very easy. Presumably you would finish this review in maybe a minute or two, but I wanted to explain to you why do we choose precision error in this situation. Also, maybe I didn't cover this yet. This is a mathematical error, so it is a critical error, because this equation in the input, or sorry, this inequality in the input is not an inequality if it doesn't have anything on the right side. Okay, so this is an error. Then you only have to choose whether or not you would think of it as of a math error or a precision error. And since this is not something that would presumably influence the whole PM solution after this step, I chose the precision error. And the same thing over here, since these are mathematical terms, then I would choose precision error. Presumably, if this, instead of A, B, and C, were some names that were mismatched from the step 1, I would choose a language error, for example. So whatever corresponds to mathematics, you choose the precision error, and when it corresponds to something which is not in field of mathematics, right, then you choose the precision error. Okay, so let's move on. I think that in step 4 there everything is correct. Again, this description is not the best. So since C is equal to 400, it follows, and then colon and the output. But this is something that does not have to be returned. So the description is clear enough. It can be better, but for situations that don't violate rules and where you as a reviewer can think of a person who would look at this PM solution and would have to learn something from it, and if you think that the person who is looking at this PM solution can learn that this C equals 400 means substitution in this input, then it's okay. It can be written better, and these situations where something can be written better are situations where you would lower the final score, which is always an option, but not the return the PM solution, because again, this does not violate any of the solution rules. Okay, so let's move on to step 5. So the step 5 states, to get the lengths of the two other sides, take arbitrary length of one side, for example, y equals 200. So in this situation, nothing is given about the other side. So we have only one side, which is 400 feet, right? And we have to find the lengths of the two other sides. So these two other sides can be whatever. The person chooses 200 in this situation. So this is, again, okay. One of the things that that I haven't mentioned yet, because I wanted to see the whole PM solution first, is that I can already see that the person who was solving this task didn't use the graph from part C. If I scroll down, I think no. So I can already see that this second part of the task is not answered. But when we get there, I'll explain what I'm actually going to write to the person who solved this task. So one of the things that I maybe failed to mention is that the task itself doesn't explicitly state that the graph should be used to find other two solutions. So the graph should only be used to explain how you find the answer by using the graph from part C. So this procedure is okay, but if it's missing graph, like this PM solution does, then this second part of the PM solution is left unanswered. So it's okay to use a different procedure as long as the procedure that has to be used is also included. So these first 8 or 9 steps are in a way added value that would give the user an explanation how to use an algebraical approach to solve this task. But since the task is to provide an answer, so two other lengths for the other two sides, and the corresponding explanation using the graph has to be included, and the corresponding explanation. Okay, so this is not inherently wrong if there is no graph included in the first 5 or 10 steps or whatever, but if, as in this situation, the PM solution it misses the one part of the answer that is required by the task, then it's not okay. Okay, so in this situation, the person chose length y equals 200. So to get the length of the two sides, take arbitrary length of one side, for example, y equals 200. And this substitution is okay, the color coordination is okay, and I feel that this step is completely okay. The next step is a step that uses PM Solver as an aid. And one of the things that people who solve tasks, and also you who review or will review tasks one day, always have to do is to open up the PM Solver procedure and to see whether or not this procedure chosen by the person who was solving the task is appropriate. So in this situation, I can see that it is appropriate because it gives some explanation for how to solve this system of inequalities, and I see that this step 6 is also okay. Again, the intro text to PM Solver is solve the system of inequalities. This is also okay. So one of the things that might be questionable to you as reviewers, or possibly also as solvers, is how to construct good enough intro text to PM Solver. And the thing is that the intro text always should give in a way, a general explanation of the procedure that is done in the PM Solver steps. So each time you choose some procedure as a solver, you can second time check your input and your intro text to PM Solver and check whether or not they are corresponding. If not, then one of the two things should be changed. In this situation, solve the system of inequalities is okay. So step 7 is that gives the solution to this system of inequalities, which is this open interval 200, 600, 1x as an element of this interval, which says the length of the third side can be any length from the given interval, for example, x equals 300. So this is okay. I also believe that since this is algebra field, this is completely okay explanation. I would even say that this is an okay explanation for the elementary field, because this is not the primary part of the task. So if your task were that you should state one solution from the interval 200, 600, and if the solution were only x equals 300, then this really gives no added value to this task and no explanation whatsoever, and these things should be explained. But if you have some procedures that are not the primary part of the task, it's okay if they are not in a way 100% great. So these situations in which you don't have to be too strict when it comes to explanation, especially in these situations where this is not the primary part of the task. So I would say that this is completely okay. And the step 8 states that using the same procedure, some other possibilities are. And so when I get here, I would have to check whether or not this is okay. And I think that this is okay. So x plus y is greater than 400. X plus c is greater than 300, and 300 plus c, which was 400, if I'm not mistaken, is greater than 500. And the same thing applies for this second situation. So one of the things which I mentioned before, this task states that we should use graph from part C to explain this region. And you can also see that the task C states that there should be a description of the region that represents possible lengths. So this part is left unanswered. So I'm going to maybe go back to the first step. I'm going to choose incomplete solution rule, or complete solution rule rather, violation of complete solution rule, which is labeled in our options as incomplete solution, right? And I'm going to say that the second part of the task is not answered, which means that I can put in the parentheses that the graph from part C was not used to find the answer as indicated in the task. Okay. And so this is feedback that I'm going to leave in the first step. I think, well, it depends on the person who will read this. I would always encourage you to leave these feedbacks for big math or big completeness errors in the first step, so that the person who gives back this feedback can then decide for themselves whether or not they are going to change the whole PM solution, or are they going to only add a few steps afterwards. And this is something which, again, is not your job to instruct them. So this is something that the person who is solving the task has to decide for themselves, whether or not they will redo the whole PM solution or just some of the parts that they did incorrectly. And this situation, again, you cannot really know what will they decide. So I think that this is good enough feedback. In these situations where you have the whole part which is left unanswered, then you cannot really give the person any additional instruction for how to solve this second part of the task. And I have waited here. Okay, so in step 8, using the same procedure, other possibilities. Okay, and we have said that this is okay. And the solution step, the power of length for the other two sides of the park will be 300 and 500 feet, 400 and 400 feet. And again, since the task requires an explanation, then the solution step also requires a summary of that explanation. Okay, so this situation, I would choose solution step, so the violation of the solution step rule, because the solution step itself does not include the corresponding explanation as required in the task. Now, this is something which is I would maybe say that it's optional when a very big part of the PM solution is not solved, or sorry, when the whole part of the PM solution does not include the required part from the task, the answer to required part of the task. So in these situations, you can either add the feedback in the solution step to remind the person who solved the task that they should also add this to the solution step. But I don't think that it's something that, again, you as a reviewer who found this task should add, because if the whole PM solution has to be changed, then also the solution step has to be changed. So this is something that we would not think that you as a reviewer did not do a good job if you didn't add this comment in the solution step, or that your review job is incorrect in any way, shape, or form. So I'm just going to add here to remind the solver that the solution step should also include the summary of the explanation from the second part of the task. So the summary of the explanation, I can maybe write required from the second part of the task, but I think this is clear enough. And once again, I will go through my whole review just to repeat some important parts. So the things that I have decided that should be returned in the first step, the incomplete solution. The PM solution is incomplete because, again, reminding you, the second part of the task is not answered. Then the first error that we have actually noticed is that the labels in step 1 and step 3 are mismatched. Again, this is a precision error because it has to do with math. But again, maybe to explain why we would not choose math error here, but precision. When you think of a math error, it's an error that causes the whole PM solution to be mathematically incorrect. This is not something which is inherently mathematically incorrect just because different labels are used. And you can think of the same thing if, for example, a function is given with a variable which is labeled as x, and then you only change your variable to t. You've actually have not done anything mathematically different to your function. The only thing that you have done differently is that you've changed the labels. And this is something which is okay if it's done within the PM solution and explicitly stated, okay, the labels will be changed from X to T or Y or whatever. Or maybe if the task requires change of variables or of labels. But if it's done without any explanation, as in this situation, this is again an error. So this is why I haven't chose the math rule, or I didn't think of this as a violation of the math rule, because again, this is not a very big error. Okay, so the same things, what I have already noticed here. Oh, step 4, again, so the right part of the second inequality is incomplete. And the solution step. And I think this is all clear. Now, I'm just going to go through a few of your questions and maybe see some that have not yet been answered, or maybe choose some which I find the biggest. Okay, so step 4 can be considered incomplete solution. Let's go back to step 4. Okay, so incomplete solution rule you can find again on our standards page, so standards.photomath.net, where you will be able to find the description of the incomplete solution rule. And the description will tell you that the whole part, every part of the task has to be answered, and these two rules, I can maybe help you to view these categories of rules in a different way. So the precision and the math rule, these two rules, are the ones that correspond to mathematics. So these inappropriate labels or inappropriate nomenclature or, I don't know, incorrect procedure, mathematically or logically incorrect procedure, and so on. So these two rules, math and precision, are the ones that correspond to math errors, be it small math errors, but that are still math errors. Those are the ones that fall in the category precision, and the bigger errors that fall in the category of math. Now, the other two rules that also fall in the category of critical errors, which again, you can find these things on our standards page if you're not already familiar with that, are the unclear explanation and incomplete solution. So the PM solution is not clear, or it violates the unclear explanation rule in the situation where an appropriate explanation is not included, or where a person who solved the task, for example, if in this situation, I can go back to this example. If you didn't have this step 6 here, and you've only had the output of this step and the input of this step without any explanation for how to solve this system of these 3 inequalities, then you would choose clear explanation or unclear explanation, because the PM solution is not clear, right? It's not that it's not complete, because the complete solution rule, or in this case, if you were to return it for violation of the complete solution rule, then you would say that it's incomplete, right? That would mean, exactly as in this situation, that one part of the task is not answered. So if I were to remove the step 6 and only have steps 5 and 7, all parts of the PM solution would be, all parts of the task would be answered, or I cannot say in this example, or all parts of the task, but this first part of the task, which would then imply only to find 2 different measures. These parts would be answered, but no explanation would have been included for how this is obtained. Okay, so the incomplete solution does not mean that the PM solution is not incomplete in sense of that it doesn't include an explanation for everything, but only that the relevant parts of the task are not answered. If everything is answered, then the solution is complete, but possibly explanations used in the PM solution are not adequate, or they don't exist at all. And again, if they don't exist at all, it's not that the PM solution is incomplete, it's that it's not explained. So the required explanation is missing. Okay, so I think that I haven't done any changes here, so I'm just gonna leave it like this. And I'm gonna go to the second task. Just let me click the return. Okay. Any additional questions? I think that people, my colleagues will answer, but we have a lot of examples here, and I would like to maybe speed up a little bit. So the situation in which, oh, sorry, do we have a question? Oh, yes, exactly. Exactly. Sorry, I haven't seen this part. Yes, it violates the legal rule. Great, great. I haven't really even thought of that. Thank you. It does violate the legal rule, because I think that we have seen that the person wrote park, right? So then you would have to instruct the solver to add this corresponding task. I'm sorry, I haven't really noticed that. I was going through as I have told you, that I thought that the whole PM solution should have been changed, but I should have explicitly stated that this part is something that should be explained. So let's move on. So this is the second task, which states if 16 2/3% of a number is 25, find the number. Okay. This is a task in elementary field, and if we start with this, so the step 1 states let x be the unknown number, which is completely okay. So we chose the variable to represent some unknown number. In step 2, according to the task, and here I can maybe mention this legal rule. Thank you for again reminding me. So according to the task, this is not something that references an explicit task. So if it were to state according to task 10, this is something that would violate the legal rule. Again, since it only states according to the task, this is okay. Okay. 16 2/3% of the unknown number x is equal to 25. That is, and then the equation is built. Now, presumably some of you can and think that they would be able to explain this in more detail. I think that, of course, a lot of us would, but looking at this step, which states 6 2/3% of the unknown number x is equal to 25, and the parts are color coordinated, I would say that this step is okay. I would very probably lower the score maybe by even 2 grades, because I think that this could have been explained in more detail, but I wouldn't say that this is not explained. So I couldn't really choose the unclear explanation in this step, or I could again, but this is not something which is completely unclear as it states in this situation. So the option of lowering the score is something that you can always do, and you always have to have this on mind. So not all PM solutions have to be, when you're reviewing tasks, you don't always have to have either return or to say that they're okay with the highest grade. So there is always an option to lower the grade, and in this situation, people who solve these tasks maybe can see what their errors were, and when they see that their average score is very low, they might understand and improve in future. But you really cannot, as a reviewer, influence all errors. As a person who solves the task, then it's your actual duty to provide as good explanation as possible. So do not always think that as a reviewer you are responsible for the greater good in a way. So you're not responsible for the quality of the written solution. You are responsible for the quality of possible improving and violation of solution rules. So in a way, when a PM solution violates any solution rule, you should return it. If it does not, but it can be better, you really don't have to, and you actually should not return these PM solutions, but you should, in a way, the way how would you tell a solver that their solution is not really okay is by giving them a lower score. Okay, so I would not return this as unclear explanation, and I would think of this as okay. And so undo changes to this feedback, okay. Oh, so I left at step 2, okay. Step 3. So the step 3 states solve for the equation for the value of x, and this is the PM solver input. I'm just going to check whether this corresponds to the output of the previous step, and I think it does. And I think that the appropriate procedure is used here. And you can check. If you don't believe me, you can always try on your own. I'm just gonna go on because I know that this is correct. One of the things which you can see in this step 3 is that the intro text is not really precise. So solve for the equation for the value of x. So one word here is most certainly it's not supposed to be here. So this second word for, if it were not here, then the step would, or the intro text would state, solve the equation for the value of x. So solve the equation for the value of x is something which is imprecise. So the equations are solved for variables. And if the variable is x, then we're solving the equation for x. We're not actually solving the equation for the value of x. This is something that, again, you have the whole section of our solution standards in the section how to use math language appropriately, where you can find all sorts of these explanations. So this second part, this second word is, it's not supposed to be here. So I'm going to choose the language rule for the second word, and I'm also going to use the precision rule, and I'm going to explain the solver why both of these parts are incorrect. So I'm going to state, I'm just going to copy and paste this in quotation marks. So solve for the equation is grammatically inappropriate. Inappropriate sentence or part of the sentence. So this is something, and I can explicitly state that this violates the language rule. Okay, and I'm also going to state that solve the equation, so without this for, solve the equation for the value, and I'm going to remove this for. So solve the equation for the value of x is an imprecise intro text to PM Solver. And so this violates the precision rule. In this way, you can help the person who will get this feedback to understand the difference. So even though the word for, if it were removed, this would still be inappropriate. But if only the value of were removed, so if the intro text were solve the equation, solve for the equation of x, for example, this would also be inappropriate. And I'm gonna write here that rewrite the intro text as, and I'm gonna give an example. So for example, solve the equation for x. And I can even put this x in LaTeX so that it's not ambiguous. So let's see if my feedback is correct. I think it's okay. So solve for the equation is grammatically inappropriate, and solve the equation for the value of x is imprecise. So this is okay. Why have I chosen to return this part of the PM solution for violating the language error? Because this part corresponds to mathematical terms, and we want all sentences that have to do with mathematics to be completely grammatically correct. So both spelled and written, and well, we cannot say anything about pronunciation, but all parts have to be grammatically correct. So the step 3, I think that we went through. And the step 4, therefore the value of the unknown number x is 150. So the x was used as the label of the unknown number, so I would say that this is okay. And the solution step states that the value of the unknown number x is 150. So the value of the unknown number x is 150. In this situation, x is not really given in the text of the task. But I personally wouldn't have returned this because the sentence states the value of the unknown number, and then it's in a way clear that the unknown number is labeled as X. This is something that we here wouldn't really think of an error if you were to return it. But I would advise you that these situations that are not ambiguous in any way, shape, or form, so it's clear that the labeled unknown number from the task itself is X. So I wouldn't, again, return this. I would encourage you also not to return this because I really believe that this is clear enough. You can return it again. If you were to return it, then I would again advise you to return it, for example, for the violation of the language rule. You could also return it for the violation of the clear explanation rule. For example, if you were to say that the explanation for what the variable X represents should be also included in the solution step, you could also return it for the violation of the solution step rule for that reason. So there is very few situations in which only one rule is appropriate. This is, for example, one situation where you could return if you read the step differently, and multiple people who would read the step differently would consider this as a different error. So this is something which is completely okay to possibly choose different rules. And again, it's okay not to return it. And I personally, again, I'm not going to return this because I think that this is completely clear and no added value would actually be provided if the person who solved this task removed the variable X or added an explanation what X meant. So I think that it's okay. I'm gonna check once again. Now I apologize for the previous error, but I have never done this type of reviewing where I have to explain to you why I'm doing, how I'm doing, and how to give you some additional advice. So I apologize in advance. But again, if you have any more complicated questions that you feel that need more explanation, I would be glad to answer your questions and just send them to our email. So I would say that this is okay, and I will click return here, and I'm gonna go to the next task. Okay, let me just take the task. Okay, so the next task is in field geometry, and it states to determine whether the following side measures would form a right triangle. So there are three measures, or the length of the sides, possible sides, right? So three numbers, 3 times the square root of 34, 9, and 15. And we are supposed to tell whether or not these three sides or these three numbers would actually form what we would say a Pythagorean triple, right? So whether or not, okay, even though they're not whole numbers, one of them is irrational, but okay. Whether or not these three sides can be the lengths of the sides of the triangle that is right. Okay, so the first step states that for the above three side measures to form a right triangle, the greatest length will be the hypotenuse and the other two will be legs. And in this situation, again, we have 3 times the square root of 34, 9, and 15. You can argue here whether or not this is explained enough. Now, I would say personally that since we have an irrational number and it's not really clear what is the order of magnitude, or at least it's not explained, what is the order of magnitude of square root of 34, so that the user can actually understand that this is really the largest side, so that the user wouldn't think that because this is the first side which is included in the text, then this must be the side which would have the greatest length. So I would say that this is not okay, and I would return this for unclear explanation. And again, this is when you read this task, this part of information is, I would say, the most important part of the information. If we have to use, and we are probably going to use the converse of the Pythagorean theorem to check whether or not these three measures could form a right triangle, then we have to have an explanation why we chose something to be the longest or the shortest. Now, of course, that you can inherently say that the person can use their calculator to approximate the value of 3 times the square root of 34. This is also okay, but the situation where this is actually primary source of information for what are we going to choose as the longest side, or the side that has the greatest length, I would say that this would have to be included. So this explanation would have to be included. Again, this situation is something that maybe some of you would return, some of you would not return. We would not penalize you if you were not to return this, but think of the person, and I'm reminding you once again, so think of the person who would only view this PM solution without altering that, saying that 3 times the square root of 34 is the greatest length. So this person presumably thinks, as I said in the beginning, that this could be the longest side because because it's the first one which is mentioned in the task. So this is the situation where I would, again, personally return this, and I would advise you to return it. And again, the explanation should not be very broad here. So the explanation could be that the order of magnitude or that the square root of 34 is greater than, I don't know, 5 because 34 is greater than 25, for example. And this is something that I would say, okay, this is an okay explanation, but only stating that an irrational number, especially, again, I'm reminding you this is the geometry field, stating that the irrational number with 3 is the greatest of 3 given real numbers is something that for users would presumably be unknown, or they wouldn't really know how to check that. So again, either an explanation using a calculator or an explanation using PM Solver to approximate the value of square root of 34, or any other type of information could be included here. Again, this is something which does not explicitly have to be returned, and I advise you again, but always think of the situations if you were a person who does not know how to solve this task. Would this be clear enough for you? Okay, so the explanation for why the chosen real number is the greatest should be added within the solving step. So, and I'm going to write here just so that the solver understands what I would advise them to do. So an explanation could be an approximation of the value of 3 times the square root of 34, or stating that 34 is greater than 25, and that the and that 25 is a perfect square such that 5 squared equals 25, right? And this is something, again, if this were the only part of the task to say which of these three numbers is the greatest, this wouldn't be enough of an explanation. But in this situation, it would be okay, because we would provide at least some explanation for why we have chosen this. So again, keep in mind that this is not something that should be returned in all situations, but since this is really the primary part of the task, to choose the longest side so that we can then know what is the hypotenuse, then this should be explained. And because I've went through when I've opened this task, and I saw that the person did not go through all three options, I wrote this feedback. But the solution could also include a situation where solver chose all three of these possibilities as the longest side, and to use the converse of the Pythagorean theorem to check whether or not any of these three situations would do, then I would not return this, okay? If they were to in a way solve this task in a trial and error form, that they choose the first side and then the second and the third, maybe not 9, because it's clear that 9 is less than 15. But if they were to choose 3 times the square root of 34 and 15 in the first situation, that this is the longest side, in the second situation that the other number is the longest side, and then do the same procedure twice, I would not have returned this. In this situation where it's explicitly stated, okay, this is the greatest length, then I think that this really should be returned. So let's check the attached hint. So the attached hint is for the right triangle. Now this attached hint really does not provide any added value, but I'm not going to return the PM solution for attaching the hint for what a right triangle is. So it's okay to have the picture of a right triangle and to state that this is a triangle whose one angle measures 90 degrees. Okay, and I'm just gonna check, so to be sure not to make errors as in the first task. So I know, I think that we're safe with legal here. Why we're again safe with legal rule here? Because all these terms that are mentioned in the task are mathematical terms, so you would not have any problems with this situation. So the second step states, use the Pythagorean theorem, or sorry, using the Pythagorean theorem, substitute A, B, and C into the formula. Now, this step is logically incorrect. Why is it logically incorrect, or we can say mathematically incorrect? Because the Pythagorean theorem states that a triangle has to be right in order for the equation a squared plus b squared equals c squared to hold. This task requires to check whether or not a triangle that would, the sides of a potential triangle that would satisfy the Pythagorean theorem will be right. So actually in this situation, the person who was solving this task should have used the converse of the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, so since the Pythagorean theorem in this case is used, I'm going to choose the math rule. And again, why math and not precision? Because this is a mathematical error and a logical error where incorrect theorem is used. And the whole procedure after the step 2 is incorrect if you only think about the situation where a Pythagorean theorem is then used. So all the following conclusions are incorrect because this explanation was actually incorrect. So inappropriate theorem is used. Use the converse of the Pythagorean theorem to prove the required statement. And again, in this situation, I think that no additional feedback is needed because I expect from the solver to be familiar with the converse of the Pythagorean theorem. So in this situation, this is again a logical error. Step 3, check the equation if it holds true. This could be written in a better way, but I think that this is clear enough. Okay, so this situation is again something which is not okay. Okay. This intro text to PM Solver, and I can open the steps and to see the procedure within the PM Solver. Again, I know all these procedures already by heart, so I'm going to believe once I open the first step, but you should always grasp at the few of these steps to make sure that this is okay. Maybe a better intro text would be, I don't know, verify whether or not the equality holds or something like that. But this is clear enough. And then step 4 states since the equation is true, then the given side lengths can form a right triangle. One of the things that we haven't checked in this situation is whether or not these 3 sides can even form a triangle, but this is something which is actually included in the in the converse of the Pythagorean theorem as well. So if c squared equals a squared plus b squared, then the Pythagorean inequality theorem also has to hold, but this is not something which is asked from in the task for us to answer. So actually the whole PM solution is okay. The only thing, again, which was incorrect is that the Pythagorean theorem instead of its converse was used. And this step 1, which again is controversial, I would advise you to return all situations that are similar to this one, where in a way the primary part of the task is left unexplained. So it's okay. Of course, if this were, for example, calculus field or statistics field, where it's expected from a user to have greater knowledge, then I would not have returned this PM solution, right? So again, this is the situation in which you can then think of the knowledge that the user has. And again, if you don't check the corresponding field, you can always think of the situation where the expert, or sorry, not the expert, the user, the person who reads this PM solution does not know anything really about this topic, and that this explanation really is not educational for them, because it states that something is true because we tell them that it's true, and this is not really educational in any shape or form. So I have a question. Are example tasks approved tasks? Okay, so we can check the example task if you would like. And again, I think, so yes, so you're right. The Pythagorean theorem is used in the example task as well. And this is something that you can then report to us, and we would be glad to correct it, because again, this is something which is not correct. But one of the things that you have to be aware of as a reviewer, not to look at the example task always as your 100% guarantee whether or not something is correct or incorrect, especially in situations where some reviewers are too fast and do not want to go through and check the whole PM solution carefully, and then some of these logical errors often happen. So in these situations where a mathematical error is included, we think of these errors as of the worst errors possible. And you can think of the person who reads this task, if they think that Pythagorean theorem can be used to either for triangles or to prove that something is a triangle, we would give them incorrect reasoning, and they presumably would not know what a theorem and its converse are, and what's actually the difference between these two things. Okay, so let's move on to the second, or sorry, not the second, the fourth task. Okay, this is very short. It states choose the correct answer from the given four options, 3 to 9. 3 to 9 corresponds to the number of the task, right? So 1/2 to the power of -5 is equal to 32, 1 over 32 minus 32, and 1 over 32. Okay, now the question is very easy, and the PM solution is then very short, but we would have to check all the steps of this PM solution to be completely sure that it's correct. So the first step, again, completely okay. The second step, where the value of the given expression is calculated. Now I'm going to open the PM solver steps, and as you can see here, now the chosen procedure of the PM solver is actually the one that only gives the value of the given expression. So no explanation is actually provided here. This is an example of the PM solution that has really no value to a person who were to ask themselves whether or not to use Photomath as their app of choice to help them understand some topic. This PM solution, again, gives no explanation for how to calculate this value of -1 to the power of one half to the power of -5. So this is not okay. And again, when I have to choose rule here, I always think about whether or not there exists mathematical error. So there does not. So everything is mathematically correct. Whether or not everything is completely solved, and it is, again, so the task is only to find the value of -1 to the power of -5, which is answered in this task. I didn't go to solution step, so I would have to check whether or not this corresponds, and it does, so A35. So the other rule that I can choose, or from the other rules that I can choose, is these rules I have not mentioned. So the quality improvement rules, the LaTeX language, legal, solution step, color coordination, visual content step 4, missing info, inappropriate behavior. These rules cannot really be used here because no error, no violation of these solution rules is located within this PM solution. One of the things that you can argue whether or not these parentheses should be bigger or not. This is something, again, it would be advised to use the appropriate LaTeX commands, but this is okay. This is okay, well enough. So the only rule that I can choose that I didn't remove is the unclear explanation, or actually the violation of the clear explanation rule. And you can again understand why this is an appropriate rule in this situation, because really no explanation is provided with this chosen procedure. And so I'm going to write to solver in the feedback that the chosen procedure of in the PM solver provides no explanation for how to calculate the value of the corresponding expression. Okay, and I'm going to advise them to either to choose an appropriate PM solver procedure or rewrite the whole procedure manually. So to say calculate the value and only give the value of the expression is not okay. Again, I do not remember if I have said whether or not this is elementary field. This is elementary field, so an appropriate explanation should be included. But once again, as I've said before, always think about what is the primary part of the task. And if the primary part of the task is to give the value of an expression, and if no explanation is provided within the PM solution, then this is something that really should be returned. So this is not a situation like we had in the previous task where you could argue whether or not you should return it or not. This is something that most certainly has to be returned, and that's okay. And if an appropriate procedure were to be chosen in this step 2, I think that everything else would be correct. So -1 to the power of -5. Again, this is something that you can penalize the solver by giving them by lowering their final score, so not to give them the highest score, but maybe 4 or something, because this is something that could be done and should have been done better, but they didn't want to waste any more time, and this is clear enough. So this is okay, and the correct answer is A, 32. This is also something that does not violate the legal rule, because it gives the solution from the corresponding part of the task. So when you have these tasks that have multiple options stating A, B, C, or D, is okay. When it's not okay is in situations where you would have the whole sentences written here that could violate our legal policy. Again, some of these situations you have explained in our standards, so I'm not going to cover most of them. But in these situations where you only have a number and a letter or something like that, this does not violate the legal rule, just as any mathematical term actually wouldn't. Okay, and let's go to next task. Okay, so this is a task in the calculus field, and the task states two methods, right? Evaluate integral from 0 to pi over 3 of a function sine of x times log of cosine of x in the following 2 ways. So the part A is in the example, so use integration by parts, and part B is use substitution. So let's see if this PM solution is okay. So in step 1, the given integral is okay, so I think that this is correctly copied. It is okay. Step 2, let the equation y equals cosine of x. This is again something that could be explained better, but is okay. Step 3, find the derivative of y with respect to x. This is something which again is okay, because in step 2 you have the explicit equation of y given as a function of x, right? And it's okay to state that you're finding the derivative of y with respect to x. So this is something which is completely okay. In step 4, we have dy by dx equals minus sine of x, and the description states from the definition of differentials, the equation can be written as, and then dy equals minus sine of x times dx. Now, the attached hint is okay. One of the things which is not okay here is the explanation. So why is the explanation not okay here? when we state that the equation can be written as, and then we indicate using the coloring, as this is just removing the in a way label dx from the left side of the equation, as if we're doing cross multiplication to the right side of the equation, just by moving this dx and cross multiplying these two fractions to obtain dy equals minus sine of x dx. This is not okay. An appropriate explanation would be from the definition of differentials. The differential of y can be written as minus sine of x dx without this input here, because in this situation we have given or the solver has given the equation of a function of y in terms of x. They have found the derivative of y with respect to x, and then the corresponding hint would state if y is a function of x, then the differential of y can be expressed in the following way. And this is the following way, but this kind of step form, which inherently explains that this is cross multiplication, is not okay. This is something that again you have in our on our standards page, so I'm not going to go too deep into this discussion. But again, this is something which is incorrect, or which we wouldn't want the users to think that it's okay to multiply or to use cross multiplication in these situations to obtain the expression or the equation for dy, to obtain this expression on the right hand side of the equation. It's again something which is not precise, and since it's not precise, I'm going to choose the precision error, and I'm going to write that the stated explanation is, and I'm going to use the word imprecise just as the rule indicates. So the stated explanation is imprecise. Either remove the input, and I can put in the parentheses that rewrite the step in the form of description plus hint plus output, or okay, and I can state here and remove color coordination, or rewrite the step as for example, since y equals cosine of x and dy by dx is equal to minus sine of x, the differential of y is given by, and column, and then so on. So this is an example how this is just an example for how this can look like. It can be expressed in dozens of different ways, but this is something which is okay. In any situations where you find these differentials to indicate that there is cross multiplication involved, this is something that we wouldn't want users to think that they can use this differential operator as a fraction, even though a lot of these a lot of the features that the fractions have and a lot of the properties are actually the properties that we can use with differentials. We wouldn't want to treat differentials as fractions or derivatives as fractions. So this is something that should be avoided, and this is the reason why there are multiple hints for example, separation of variables when you have ordinary differential equations that are separable, and in this situation where you have the hints for differentials and so on. So we wouldn't want any situations where something could be misinterpreted as cross multiplication. So let's move on. So from the definition, this is okay. So step 5, multiply a factor if -1 both sides of the equation. So this description is not really clear, and I'm going to return it for the violation of the language rule because I don't think that this is clear enough. So the description is not grammatically correct. Why is this not grammatically correct? Because again, multiply a factor if this was probably had to be of -1 both sides of the equation. This really has no meaning, and I'm not even going to state how to rewrite this because there are really dozens and hundreds of ways to include a better description, or any description which would actually be grammatically correct. And again, why would I return this? Because this is not an error which is, I don't know, a typo or something like that. This is something that has to do with an explanation of mathematical of the algebraic transformation within the step. So I'm returning it so that the person who would read the corrected form of this PM solution would understand how to perform this algebraic transformation. So simplify the right side of the equation. Again, since we are in the calculus field, things like multiplying expressions by -1 or by 0 or by 1 do not require any additional explanation. So again, think of the primary part of the task. If you are solving or reviewing the solved integral, then it's okay if the simplified, the right side of the equation is the description within the step where the multiplication of two expressions, especially if one expression is like -1 or a number or something like that is used. So let's move on. Step 7. Since the variables should be changed, the bounds should also be changed. So this is a correct statement. It's okay. Step 8. Y equals cosine of x. So this is the equation given in the step 2. So this is okay. Substitute x equals 0 into the equation. Again, okay. Step 9, solve for the value of y at x equals 0. This is again something that I think we have covered before. One of the things which you can see here in the editor is a sneak peek for a feature that is going to be available very near in future, where you would have where you are going to have the explanation for the errors or warnings highlighted in the editor itself. So a statement, equation, inequality can only be solved for a certain term that appears in it. So this also gives the person who solved the task and you as a reviewer an indicator that this is incorrect. So the intro text to PM Solver is imprecise, and I can give an advice to the solver: rewrite the description as, for example, I don't know, calculate the value of y for x equals 0. But also maybe some even better options are possible. This is something that I'm just showing you how it would be the best for you to construct your feedbacks, to give an explanation of an error, and if you can be precise, to give an advice for how to change the error that you have seen. So calculate the value of y for x equals 0, or evaluate y for x equals 0, since y is really indeed the function of x, and this is also appropriate in this situation. So as I mentioned, this is a feature that is going to be soon available for all of you, and you would be able to see it. I can see it now because I'm an internal user, so these features are exclusive to us at this point. Okay, so step 10, substitute x equals pi over 3 into the equation, the same as in step 8, so this is completely okay. Step 11, this is again violation of the precision rule. Again, why precision rule? You have written everything in our on our standards page, so revise again if you're unfamiliar with this. And I'm just going to say that this is imprecise, and I'm not even going to bother with an advice for how to change it, because this is exactly the same error that appeared in the previous step. So no, I think that no further explanation is needed in this situation. So y equals cosine of x at x equals 0. Cosine of 0 is 1. This is okay. I can open the PM solver steps, trigonometric values table. You can open this yourself as well and see that this is explained. The same thing, I think, yes, happened here. So this is also okay. And one of the things that I didn't check, but I know that it's okay, is this situation with the derivative, because I know how these procedures in the PM solver work. But you should, if you're not 100% sure, always check. And even if you are 95% sure, check. It's better to feel safe than sorry, right? So so step 12, here we have the substitution. So y equals cosine of x minus 1 dy equals sine x dx. Replace 0 by 1 and pi over 3 by 1/2. So in step 12, one thing that you could argue in this situation is whether or not the order of the left and the right hand side of the corresponding substitution equations are okay. Now, please keep in mind again that this is calculus field and that you're solving integrals. So adding additional steps in which y equals cosine of x or minus 1 dy equals sine x dx, and where these sides of the equations were altered and reciprocated, then this would provide no additional information for experts who in the calculus field, right? So in the situation where you have to solve integrals. So this is okay as a substitution description in the step 12, even though it would be better if it were to say cosine of x equals y and sine x dx equals minus 1 dy, because this is the change that is being done in this step. This is also appropriate, and again, this is on you to lower the score if this were not correct. If you deem that this could be done in a bit better way, but not incorrect, right? So this is, everything here is okay. Now the substitution is done as stated in the text of the task to solve the integral, and then supposedly, yes, okay, so in this situation the indefinite integral is being solved. Now in this situation, I think that the PM solver also uses integration by parts or partial integration to solve the value of the integral. Now, this is something that in the situation where this substitution is applied, so the person who solved the task did use and appropriate methods stated in the task, this is okay. Even though some of you presumably could think of the procedure where only a substitution without any integration by parts were applied to calculate the value of the integral. Since the substitution was applied and the change of variables were applied and everything was okay, then step 13 and this solver procedure is also, the PM solver procedure is also okay. So this situation is okay to not to deem this as a violation of the rule of the complete solution rule. Okay, so I think that this is okay. I'm just gonna check once more and go through all feedbacks that I've written here. So the differentials that we spoke, step 5, and step 9, step 11, the things that we've discussed, and this is okay. And the value of the definite integral, I've checked that this is okay. I can check once again for you to make sure that it is okay. And I'm going to return this task, and I think that we are almost over now. I will give you 2 minutes to maybe add some additional questions. I will try to answer some of them, the questions that presumably some of our team did not answer in your chat, and then we'll continue and wrap things up. So 2 minutes, break of 2 minutes, I think. Hi guys. So I think that I have no additional questions that were written here. I'm just gonna check once more. No. Okay, so I think that we can wrap this up. The first thing I would like to tell you that we would very much appreciate. Oh, I have a question. Instead of writing the same mistake in 2 steps for intro text, can we write it together? Yes, of course. Of course. This is always an option. I actually do not know why I've chosen to do this, but you can do it either way. Okay, so I think that I'm going to wrap this up now. Go to internal task. Sorry. So I cannot return back to my task because I have returned the PM solution. So one of the things that I wanted to tell you that we would very much appreciate your feedback. So whether or not you think this was useful, to give us feedback on both our subreddit and to send us your opinions and suggestions for possibly some other topics that you want us to cover. to our email as well. And I think that's all that I have to say. All questions that are left unanswered, either please send them to us and we would be glad to answer them. And that's all. Thank you all for joining. I hope that you found this at least a little bit useful, and that you will join for our next Photomath Live. Bye, everyone.